In the bustling heart of Lomé, Togo, a woman stood at the edge of a crumbling building, staring down at the street she once owned. Her hands trembled as she clutched a faded photograph of three boys, their smiles bright with promise. Behind her, footsteps approached. A young woman's voice called out softly, "Madam Felicia, please step back from there." Felicia turned, tears streaming down her weathered face. "They left me here to die, Naomi. My own sons. The boys I sacrificed everything for." But this story doesn't begin here, at the edge of despair. It begins decades earlier, in a small coastal town called Anfoin, where a barefoot girl named Felicia Adade watched her mother die from a treatable illness because they couldn't afford medicine. Felicia was only 14 when she stood at her mother Afi's grave, clutching a handful of dried flowers she'd picked from the roadside. The other mourners had left, but she remained, her small frame shaking with silent sobs. She whispered to the fresh earth, "Mama, I promise you, I will never be this powerless again. I will build something so strong that no one I love will ever suffer like this." Within a week, Felicia was working at Kofi's mechanic workshop on the edge of town. The old man took pity on her, letting her sleep in the back room in exchange for fetching tools and cleaning engine parts. She was small for her age, but her hands were quick and her eyes were sharp. She watched everything, learning how engines breathed, how gears meshed, how broken things could be made whole again. "Girl, hand me the wrench," Kofi would grunt, and Felicia would already be there, the correct tool in her outstretched hand. By 16, she could diagnose engine problems just by listening to their sounds. By 18, she was driving Kofi's tow truck, navigating the chaotic streets of Lomé with a confidence that made grown men step aside. And by 20, she had saved every franc she'd ever earned, counting coins by candlelight each night. Her fingers stained with grease and hope. The day she bought her first minibus, she wept. It was a battered yellow vehicle with rust eating through the wheel wells and seats that smelled of old fish and diesel fuel. But to Felicia it was a palace on wheels. She painted a name on its side in careful letters, AFI. "Mama, look what your daughter has done," she whispered, running her hand along the warm metal. That single bus became her world. She drove 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, navigating the dusty roads between Lomé and the northern villages. She learned every passenger's story, gave credit to those who couldn't pay, and never once turned away a pregnant woman or an elderly person, even when her own stomach growled with hunger. Her reputation grew like wildflowers after rain. People began requesting Madam Felicia's bus specifically. They trusted her. They loved her. And slowly and possibly that one battered bus multiplied. By 1995 she owned 5 buses. By 2005, Adade Transports was painted on 50 vehicles that crisscrossed Togo like the threads of a giant web, connecting villages to cities, farmers to markets, students to schools. Felicia never forgot where she came from. She hired drivers from the slums, gave them fair wages and treated them like family. When a driver's child was sick, she paid the hospital bills. When a mechanic's wife died, she covered the funeral. Her workers would have walked through fire for her. But success brought something else into her life, something she hadn't planned for. At 32, she met a man named Yao, a charming accountant with smooth words and smoother hands. He courted her with poetry and promises, and for the first time since her mother's death, Felicia allowed herself to believe in love. They married quickly. Within 4 years, she had given birth to 3 sons, Kwame, Kojo, and Derrick. Yao left when Derrick was 2, disappearing with another woman and a substantial amount of money from the company account. Felicia found the note on their bed. "You were always married to your buses, never to me." She burned the note, wiped her tears, and went back to work. She had 3 sons to raise, and she would give them everything she never had. Everything. That was her first mistake. Kwame, Kojo, and Derrick grew up in a mansion in the hills above Lomé, with marble floors that reflected the chandeliers like pools of light. They attended the British International School, wore imported clothes, and spent their holidays in Paris and London. Felicia worked herself to exhaustion to afford their lives, believing that comfort would protect them from the pain she had known. But comfort, she would learn too late, can be its own kind of poison. Kwame grew into a tall, arrogant young man with his father's smooth tongue and none of his mother's compassion. He studied business in London and returned with expensive suits and a contempt for the drivers and mechanics who had built his mother's empire. "These people are beneath us, mother," he said once, watching a driver eat his lunch in the parking lot. "We should be hiring professionals, not charity cases from the slums." Felicia's hand had frozen on her teacup. "Those charity cases, as you call them, built everything you have, including the money that paid for your education." Kwame had simply shrugged and walked away. Kojo was worse in different ways. He was reckless, crashing company vehicles while drunk, sleeping with the secretaries, and treating the family business like his personal playground. Felicia received reports of him gambling away thousands of francs in the beach clubs, buying rounds for strangers while his own workers struggled to feed their families. And Derrick, her youngest, her baby. He was the most dangerous of all because he was smart. He learned the business inside and out, but only to find ways to siphon money into private accounts. He created fake vendor contracts, inflated repair costs, and skimmed profits with the precision of a surgeon. Felicia saw it all. She watched her sons become strangers, their hearts growing cold in proportion to their bank accounts growing fat. She lay awake at night, wondering where she had gone wrong, how her sacrifices had produced these men who valued nothing but money and status. One evening, she called them to dinner at the mansion. She had prepared their favorite dishes herself, something she rarely had time for anymore. As they ate, barely looking up from their phones, she spoke quietly. "I want to tell you about your grandmother, AFI. About the woman you were named after, Kwame." Kwame sighed. "Mother, we've heard this story 1,000 times." "Then hear it once more," she said, her voice hardening. "She died because we had nothing. I held her hand as she begged for water, and I couldn't even afford to buy her clean water. Do you understand what that does to a child?" Kojo laughed, actually laughed. "That was a long time ago, mother. We're not poor anymore. Why do you insist on living in the past?" Derrick, ever the diplomat, reached across and patted her hand. "What mother is trying to say is that we should be grateful. And we are, mother. We're very grateful for everything you've given us." His words were hollow, and they both knew it. That night, Felicia made a decision. She would test them, just once, to see if there was any love left beneath the greed. She would test them to see if they loved her, or just her money. Kwame rubbed his temples. "There's something else. I spoke with the accountant this morning. The company is in trouble. Mother made some bad investments last quarter. We're hemorrhaging money." This was a lie Felicia had arranged, of course. Her finances were stronger than ever. But her sons didn't know that. "How much trouble?" Kojo asked. "Serious trouble. We might need to sell off some assets, cut costs wherever we can." The three brothers looked at their mother lying helpless in the bed. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Derrick said softly, "There are facilities that specialize in this kind of care. Places where she'd be with other people in her condition. Professional staff, around-the-clock attention." "You mean a nursing home?" Kojo asked. "I mean a care facility. It would actually be better for her, better than trying to manage everything at home. And it would be more cost-effective." Kwame nodded slowly. "It makes sense actually. She'd have proper medical supervision." "Exactly," Derrick agreed. "We'd visit her regularly, of course. But this way, we could focus on saving the company. That's what she'd want, isn't it? To protect everything she built." They left the room to discuss details, their voices fading down the corridor. Felicia lay in the darkness, tears sliding silently from the corners of her closed eyes. The test had taken less than an hour, and she had her answer. Over the next 2 weeks, her condition remained the same, carefully maintained by her performance. The sons visited less and less frequently, their conversations focused entirely on the company's finances and their own concerns. Finally, Kwame arrived with brochures. "Mother, we've found a wonderful place for you. It's called Serenity Gardens. They specialize in elderly care, and the staff is supposed to be excellent." Felicia knew the truth. She had researched every care facility in Lomé. Serenity Gardens was one of the cheapest, a barely regulated facility on the outskirts of the city where forgotten people went to die slowly and alone. "Please," she managed to slur out, reaching for Kwame's hand with her good arm. "Don't send me away. I want to stay home. Please." Kwame pulled his hand back gently but firmly. "Mother, this is for the best. You'll see. You'll be much better cared for there than we could ever manage at home." The day they took her to Serenity Gardens, the building looked exactly as she had imagined, gray and lifeless, with peeling paint and windows that stared like dead eyes. Inside, it smelled of bleach and urine, a futile attempt to mask decay with chemicals. Her room was small, with a single bed, a plastic chair, and a window that looked out onto a concrete wall. The other residents shuffled through the hallways like ghosts, their eyes empty, their families long gone. The sons stayed for 15 minutes, making cheerful small talk that echoed obscenely in the bare room. "We'll visit soon," Kwame promised, already edging toward the door. "Very soon," Kojo echoed. Derrick kissed her forehead, and for a moment, she thought she saw guilt flash across his face. But then it was gone, and so was he. That first night, Felicia lay in the narrow bed, listening to someone crying in a distant room, and allowed herself to truly weep. Not tears of sadness now, but tears of rage and grief for the sons she had loved. The sons who had died somewhere along the way and been replaced by these hollow strangers. But Felicia Adade had not survived poverty, widowhood, and decades of cutthroat business by surrendering to despair. By morning, she had dried her tears and begun to observe her surroundings with a strategist's eye. The staff was overworked and underpaid, but most of them were kind when they had the time to be. The facility was understaffed, corners were cut, but there was one caregiver who stood out from the rest. Her name was Naomi Dasa, and she was 24 years old with eyes that held both sorrow and an unbreakable gentleness. Unlike the other staff who rushed through their duties with exhausted efficiency, Naomi took time with each resident. She learned their names, their stories, their preferences for how they liked their tea. When she came to feed Felicia that first morning, she introduced herself with a smile that reached her eyes. "Good morning, Madam Felicia. I'm Naomi. I'll be helping you with breakfast today. Do you prefer your porridge thick or thin?" Felicia maintained her act, allowing Naomi to spoon-feed her slowly, carefully, with patience that seemed endless. But she watched the young woman intently, noting the worn shoes, the faded uniform that had been mended multiple times, the calloused hands that moved with practiced grace. Over the following days, they developed a routine. Naomi would arrive each morning, help Felicia wash and dress, and then they would sit by the window while Naomi fed her breakfast. And Naomi talked. She talked about growing up in an orphanage after her parents died in a car accident when she was 7. She talked about her younger brother and sister whom she supported with her meager salary. She talked about her dream of attending university to study nursing, to become more than just a caregiver, to truly help people heal. "I save every franc I can," Naomi said one morning, her voice bright with hope. "In 2 more years, maybe 3, I'll have enough for tuition. I know it seems like a long time, but dreams don't have expiration dates, do they?" Felicia wanted to speak, to tell this young woman that she reminded her of herself at that age, full of determination and hope despite impossible odds. But she maintained her silence, her slurred mumbles, her helpless act. Weeks passed. The sons did not visit. They sent money for her care, the bare minimum, but they did not come. Naomi noticed. "Your sons must be very busy," she said one day, a diplomatic attempt at kindness. Felicia's good eye filled with tears, and this time they were real. That evening, Naomi stayed after her shift ended. She pulled the plastic chair close to Felicia's bed and took her hand. "Madam Felicia, I don't know your whole story. But I see you. I see how you watch everything. How your eyes are sharp even when your body is weak. I see your sadness. And I want you to know that you're not alone here. I see you." Something broke open in Felicia's chest. This stranger, this young woman who had nothing, was offering her something her own sons had refused to give. Genuine care, genuine presence, genuine love. That night, Felicia made a decision. She waited until the facility was quiet, until the night nurse had made her rounds, and then she spoke in her normal voice, clear and strong. "Naomi, I need you to come here tomorrow evening after your shift. There's something I need to tell you. Something important." The next evening, Naomi arrived to find Felicia sitting up in bed, no longer slumped, her eyes alert and focused. Naomi gasped and rushed forward. Madam Felicia, you can move. You can speak. Should I call the doctor? This is a miracle. Sit down, child, Felicia said quietly, and listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you. Over the next hour, Felicia told Naomi everything. Her life story, from poverty to success. Her son's betrayal. The elaborate test she had staged. The fake paralysis. The truth about her wealth, her business, her plans. Naomi listened in stunned silence, her eyes growing wider with each revelation. But why? Naomi finally asked. Why tell me all this? Felicia reached out and took Naomi's hand. Because in these weeks, you have shown me more genuine kindness than my own sons showed me in years. Because I see in you the person I used to be. Because blood is not the only thing that makes family. She pulled out an envelope from beneath her mattress, one she had arranged to have smuggled in by Dr. Kawase. These are account numbers, property deeds, and legal documents. I have evidence of my son's fraud and embezzlement. I have lawyers ready to act. But I need your help. I need someone I can trust. Naomi shook her head slowly. Madam, I'm just a caregiver. I don't know anything about business or legal matters. Why me? Because you have something my sons lost long ago. You have integrity. You have compassion. You have the courage to care about people even when there's nothing in it for you. Felicia squeezed her hand. I want to give you an opportunity, Naomi. Not charity, but opportunity. Help me reclaim what's mine. And I will help you build the future you've been dreaming of. Tears streamed down Naomi's face. I don't know what to say. Say yes. Yes, Naomi whispered. Yes. Over the following month, they worked in secret. Naomi became Felicia's courier, meeting with her lawyers, carrying documents, gathering evidence. The lawyers compiled a devastating case. Forged contracts, embezzled funds, fraudulent transactions. The sons had been stealing for years, assuming their mother was too busy, too trusting, or too ignorant to notice. They were wrong on all counts. Meanwhile, Felicia began her miraculous recovery. First, she regained feeling in her fingers. Then she could grip a spoon. Within weeks, she was walking with a cane, her speech becoming clearer each day. Dr. Kawase played his role perfectly, expressing amazement at her progress while quietly documenting everything for the legal case ahead. The sons, when informed of her improvement, responded with brief phone calls and vague promises to visit soon. They were too busy with company matters, they said. Too many important meetings. They were so glad she was feeling better. 3 months after arriving at Serenity Gardens, Felicia was released. But she didn't go home to the mansion. Instead, she moved into a modest apartment that Naomi helped her rent, staying hidden while her lawyers finalized their strategy. The sons, meanwhile, had called an emergency board meeting. The company was indeed in trouble now, genuine trouble caused by their mismanagement and theft. They planned to vote to sell off major assets, liquidate parts of the fleet, and pocket the proceeds before the entire operation collapsed. The meeting was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon at the Adade Transport's headquarters, a modern building in downtown Lomé that Felicia had built a decade earlier. The board members gathered in the conference room on the top floor, men and women who had worked with Felicia for years. Kwame stood at the head of the table, presenting financial reports that painted a dire picture. As you can see, we have no choice but to downsize significantly. We'll need to sell at least 30 buses and terminate 100 employees. The board members shifted uncomfortably. These were loyal workers, people they knew by name. What about your mother? One board member asked. Does she know about this plan? Derrick answered smoothly. Our mother is still recovering from her stroke. She's in no condition to make business decisions. We have medical documentation supporting our authority to act on her behalf. That won't be necessary, a voice said from the doorway. Every head turned. Felicia stood in the entrance, dressed in a sharp business suit, her hair elegantly styled, her eyes blazing with an intensity that filled the room like a physical force. Beside her stood Naomi, carrying a briefcase. Behind them, 2 lawyers and a security guard. The color drained from Kwame's face. Kojo's mouth fell open. Derrick gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. Mother, Kwame stammered. We heard you were still. Still what? Felicia walked into the room with steady, powerful steps, no cane, no weakness, no helitation. Still paralyzed? Still helpless? Still convenient to forget about. She moved to the head of the table, and Kwame automatically stepped aside. I have been recovering quite well, as you can see. Miraculous, isn't it? Almost as miraculous as my sudden stroke in the first place. Understanding dawned on the sons' faces, followed quickly by panic. Felicia placed her hands on the table and leaned forward. For weeks, I lay in that facility waiting for you to visit. Waiting for even one of you to show that you cared about me as a person, not as a source of money. You failed that test spectacularly. Mother, we can explain, Derrick began. Oh, I don't need explanations. What I need are answers to some financial questions. She nodded to her lawyers, who began distributing folders to each board member. These documents detail systematic theft, fraud, and embezzlement by my 3 sons over the past 5 years. Fake vendor contracts, inflated expenses, money transferred to private offshore accounts. It's all here. The board members opened their folders, their expressions growing darker as they read. You stole from this company, Felicia continued, her voice like steel. You stole from me. You stole from every worker who depends on us for their livelihood. And you did it while I was building everything you now tried to destroy. Kwame found his voice. We were protecting the company. We were trying to make it more profitable. By stealing from it. Felicia's laugh was bitter. By dumping your mother in a facility where people go to be forgotten? By never visiting, never calling, never once asking if I needed anything besides your minimum payment for my care? The room was silent except for the rustle of papers. You taught us that business was everything. Kojo shouted suddenly. You worked all the time. You cared more about your buses than about us. What did you expect? Felicia's expression softened for just a moment, and pain flickered across her face. I expected you to understand that I worked so hard, so you wouldn't have to suffer like I did. I expected you to learn compassion from watching me help others. I expected you to become better than me, not worse. She straightened. But I was wrong. I gave you everything, and in doing so, I taught you to value nothing. She turned to the board. Effective immediately, I am removing Kwame, Kojo, and Derrick Adade from all positions within this company. They will be stripped of their stock options and removed from my will. Furthermore, I am pressing criminal charges for embezzlement and fraud. Mother, please. The 3 sons moved toward her, but the security guard stepped between them. You can't do this, Derrick said desperately. We're your sons. We're family. Felicia looked at them for a long moment, and when she spoke, her voice was heavy with sorrow. Family is not defined by blood alone. Family is defined by love, loyalty, and sacrifice. You stopped being my family the moment you left me in that place to die. She gestured to Naomi. This young woman showed me more love in 3 months than you showed me in 3 years. She sat with me. She listened to me. She cared about me as a person, not as an ATM. She reminded me what family truly means. Turning back to the board, she straightened her shoulders. I am establishing a scholarship fund in my mother's name, AFI Adade, to help young people from poor backgrounds attend university. The first recipient of this scholarship is Naomi Dasa, who will study business and nursing. Upon completion of her education, she will take a leadership position within this company. Naomi gasped, tears streaming down her face. Furthermore, Felicia continued, we will be implementing new policies to ensure our workers receive better wages and benefits. We built this company on their backs. It's time we honored that debt. The board members, many of whom had been quietly sympathetic to the workers for years, began to applaud. The sound grew, filling the room with affirmation and support. The sons stood frozen, their world collapsing around them. Security will escort you from the building, Felicia said to them. Your personal belongings will be sent to you. You are no longer welcome here. As the security guard moved forward, Kwame made one last desperate attempt. You can't survive without us. We know this business. Felicia's smile was cold. I built this business from a single broken-down bus and a dream. I survived poverty, widowhood, and betrayal. I will survive your absence quite easily. The sons were let out, their protests echoing down the hallway until the doors closed behind them, cutting off their voices like the severing of a cord. Felicia remained standing at the head of the table for a moment, her hands trembling slightly now that the confrontation was over. Naomi moved to her side, offering silent support. Madam Felicia, one of the older board members, said gently, "That took tremendous courage." "No," Felicia replied softly. "It took tremendous pain. But pain, I have learned, is sometimes necessary for healing." The months that followed were difficult but liberating. The sons, cut off from their mother's wealth, quickly discovered that they had no real skills or resources of their own. The money they had stolen was tied up in legal proceedings. Their so-called friends disappeared when the money did. Kwame ended up working as a mid-level manager in a small transport company, a bitter irony that wasn't lost on anyone. Kojo bounced between jobs, his recklessness finally catching up with him. And Derrick, the smartest of the three, opened a small accounting firm that struggled to find clients willing to trust someone convicted of embezzlement. They ended up in modest apartments in Anfoin, the same coastal town where their mother had grown up, where their grandmother had died in poverty. History had come full circle, but without the honor that had defined Felicia's struggle. Meanwhile, Felicia and Naomi worked together to transform Adade Transports. They implemented fair wage policies, improved working conditions, and established a profit-sharing program that gave drivers and mechanics a stake in the company's success. Naomi proved to be a brilliant student, absorbing everything Felicia taught her about business while pursuing her nursing degree. She brought fresh ideas and a compassion that reminded everyone why they had loved working for Felicia in the first place. One evening, 2 years after the confrontation in the boardroom, Felicia and Naomi sat on the veranda of Felicia's home, watching the sun set over Lomé. The city sprawled before them, lights beginning to twinkle as darkness fell. "Do you ever regret it?" Naomi asked softly. "Cutting them off completely? They are still your sons." Felicia was quiet for a long moment. "Every day," she finally admitted. "Every single day. I dream about the boys they used to be, before wealth corrupted them. I dream about holding them as babies, their small hands gripping my fingers with such trust." She wiped away a tear. "But I don't regret my decision. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes it means allowing people to face the consequences of their choices." "They could still change," Naomi suggested. "Perhaps. And if they do, if they truly learn and grow and become people of integrity, I would welcome them back with open arms. But I won't enable their greed anymore. I won't pretend that money can substitute for character." Naomi took Felicia's hand. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing. You saw potential in a stranger. That's the real legacy, Madam Felicia. Not your buses or your money, but your ability to recognize worth in people who others overlook." Felicia squeezed her hand back. "And you reminded me of something I had forgotten. You reminded me why I started this journey in the first place. Not for wealth or status, but to make sure that no one would have to feel as powerless as I felt watching my mother die." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged one by one, like diamonds scattered across black velvet. "Tell me again about your grandmother, AFI, Naomi said. And Felicia told the story again, as she had told it countless times before. But this time, it didn't end with grief. This time, it ended with hope, with the understanding that every ending is also a beginning, and that sometimes the family we choose loves us better than the family we're born into." In the years that followed, Naomi graduated with honors and took a position as Director of Operations at Adade Transports. Under her leadership, the company expanded into new territories while maintaining its commitment to ethical business practices. Workers called her Little AFI, a tribute to both her compassion and her strength. Felicia, now in her 70s, stepped back from daily operations but remained actively involved as chairwoman. She spent her time mentoring young entrepreneurs from poor backgrounds, sharing her story, and funding scholarships that helped dozens of young people escape poverty through education. The story of the woman they cast away and the daughter she found became legendary in Lomé. People told it in market stalls and taxicabs, in churches and mosques, a modern parable about greed and redemption, about betrayal and second chances, about the true meaning of family. As for the sons, only Kojo eventually sought reconciliation. 5 years after his mother's confrontation, he appeared at her door, thin and humbled by life's harsh lessons. He didn't ask for money or position. He simply asked for forgiveness. Felicia welcomed him in, offered him tea, and listened as he poured out years of regret and pain. When he finished, she embraced him, and they both wept for the wasted years and the hard-learned lessons. She didn't restore his inheritance or give him a position in the company. Instead, she did something more valuable. She helped him find honest work, supported his recovery from alcoholism, and slowly, carefully, began to rebuild their relationship on a foundation of truth rather than money. Kwame and Derrick never came. Pride perhaps, or shame, or simply the inability to admit they were wrong, kept them away. Felicia grieved for them, but no longer let that grief consume her. On her 80th birthday, Felicia stood before a crowd of hundreds at the Adade Transport's anniversary celebration. Workers, board members, scholarship recipients, and community leaders filled the courtyard. Naomi stood beside her, now 36 and confident in her role as CEO. "Someone asked me recently what my greatest achievement was," Felicia began, her voice still strong despite her years. "They assumed I would say building this company from nothing, or surviving poverty, or creating hundreds of jobs. But my greatest achievement is standing right here beside me." She put her arm around Naomi's shoulders. "My greatest achievement was learning that love and loyalty are not inherited traits. They are choices we make every day. My greatest achievement was understanding that sometimes the children of our hearts matter more than the children of our bodies." She paused, looking out over the crowd. "I once believed that success was measured in buses and francs and buildings. But true success is measured in lives touched, in dignity restored, in opportunities given to those who need them most. That is the legacy I want to leave behind." The crowd erupted in applause that echoed through the streets of Lomé. A city transformed by one woman's determination to rise from poverty, to build an empire, to face betrayal, and to choose love over bitterness. And somewhere in the crowd, unnoticed by anyone except Felicia herself, Kojo stood with his wife and young daughter, tears streaming down his face, finally understanding what his mother had been trying to teach him all along. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the power of compassion over greed, of chosen family over blood ties, of resilience over despair, then please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. And in the comments below, tell us, who is the Naomi in your life, the person who showed you love when you needed it most? Let's celebrate those everyday heroes who remind us what really matters. Thank you for watching, and remember, kindness is the only wealth that never fades.